Another week has passed here in Piemonte. A week of small steps, dusty hands, some good food, and the kind of work that rarely feels spectacular in the moment, but slowly transforms the place over time. In this video, we'll continue expanding the vegetable garden, plant some potatoes, make some progress on the fence, spend some time exploring the countryside, and we finish the day with a homemade lasagna inspired by the traditional ragù of Bologna. But first, let's get started in the garden. Today I'm preparing a new bed for potatoes. Just like the rest of the vegetable garden thus far, I'm sticking to a no-dig approach. Starting with a layer of cardboard laid directly on top of the existing vegetation to help suppress weeds underneath. On top of that goes a layer of soil from the property itself. It's a heavy, clay-rich marl that tends to form large clumps when it dries, so I spend a bit of time breaking it apart. Nothing complicated, just making sure the future roots will have an easier time finding their way through the soil. For the next layer I'm using a mixture of several materials that I already have available. Some of the old hay from the loft, some general potting soil, some more soil from the property, and a generous amount of worm castings. The goal isn't to create an incredibly rich growing medium, quite the opposite actually. I'm simply trying to create something lighter and more open than clay alone. A soil that drains just a little bit better and breathes a bit more, and hopefully gives the potatoes a good start. And then it's finally time to plant. The variety I've chosen is called Desiree or Desiree. It's a potato that has been around since the 1960s and remains popular for good reason. It's known for producing reliable crops, tolerating dry conditions, and performing in a wide range of soils. The potatoes themselves are also very versatile in the kitchen too, making them a good all-round choice for a garden like this. I spaced them roughly 30 centimeters or about 12 inches apart. And once they're in place, I cover them with another layer of the soil mixture and finish everything with a thick blanket of mulch. In my case, that means more of the old hay from the loft. If you want to know more about our mulching strategy, I'll link a video in which I discuss it in detail. There are still 2 more rows to plant, but first it's time to tackle something else. While Nikki gets started on extending the electric fence, I continue what feels like a never-ending battle against the blackberries, or brambles. Every time I think they're under control, another root appears. Another stump, another reminder that nature is incredibly persistent sometimes. Of course, that's also part of what makes this place beautiful. As part of the fence extension, an old lamppost has to make way for a new and much sturdier fence post. And before anyone worries, the lamp hasn't worked for many years and the cable running towards it is completely disconnected and no longer in use. One more relic of the past, making room for the next chapter of this property. After a walk through the hills and a few quiet moments away from the garden, it's time to head back inside. Because no day of physical work feels quite complete without something good to eat at the end of it. Today I'm making lasagna, using a modern rustic interpretation of the original ragù alla Bolognese. Despite what many people think, traditional ragù from Bologna isn't really a tomato sauce at all. Over the years, countless versions have appeared that bear little resemblance to the original. I'm not claiming this recipe is perfectly authentic either, but I do try to stay closer to its roots. Everything starts with pancetta. If you've never used it before, it's probably closest to bacon, but there are some important differences. Pancetta is actually cured rather than smoked, and it has a cleaner, more delicate flavor. Today I'm using about 150 grams in total, split halfway between smoked and unsmoked pancetta. The unsmoked version is more traditional, but I enjoy the subtle depth a little smoke can bring. As the pancetta slowly renders its fat, the kitchen already starts to smell promising. No oil, no butter, just the fat from the pancetta itself. Next comes the sofrito, a generous stalk of celery, 2 small onions and a carrot. Traditionally, these vegetables are chopped very finely, and a food processor would certainly make quick work of it. But I prefer a slightly rougher texture. Feels just a little bit more rustic, a little bit more honest. And this is not food for people in a hurry. The vegetables cook gently over a relatively low heat until they soften, sweeten, and begin to take on a little color. Only then do I add the beef. About 300 grams in total. And again, patience is the most important ingredient. Everything just cooks very slowly. Nothing is rushed, and at some point I also grate in a large clove of garlic. Strictly speaking, garlic really doesn't belong in a classic ragù alla Bolognese, but sometimes tradition and personal preference have to find a compromise. And this is mine. Once the meat is browned, it's time for the wine. I rarely measure anything when I cook, and I've already made much more effort than usual in keeping track of the quantities for this video, but the wine is added entirely by feel. Maybe like a large glass, maybe a little more. More importantly, it's an excellent excuse to pour a glass for yourself as well. Today I've chosen a Nebbiolo. It's a local wine with enough structure and earthy character to stand up to the richness of the sauce. It doesn't really need to be expensive, but I do follow one simple rule. If I wouldn't drink it, I don't want to cook with it. And for anyone wondering when the tomatoes do arrive, this is the moment. And the answer is barely. Just a spoonful or two of tomato paste. That's it. Traditional ragù is a meat sauce first and foremost. The tomato plays a supporting role rather than taking the center stage. And after a little bit more cooking, I also add a generous splash of whole milk. It might seem unusual if you've never made ragù before, but it softens the acidity and it gives the finished sauce a remarkable richness and balance. And then comes the hardest part, waiting. The sauce bubbles away gently while the flavors slowly come together. The longer you give it, the better it becomes. I mentioned earlier that we're making lasagna, so there is still one important step left, and that's the bechamel. I start by melting 50 grams of butter and stirring in 50 grams of flour to form a roux. After a few minutes of gentle cooking, it's time to start adding milk. And then some more milk. And then even more milk. Every time it feels like it's enough, the sauce somehow asks for another splash. In total, I think I used roughly half a liter. A little black pepper goes in as well. Nutmeg would be more traditional, but whichever route you choose, restraint is usually the better option. The finished bechamel should be slightly thinner than you think it needs to be. As it cools, it thickens, and the pasta sheet will absorb some of the moisture as the lasagna bakes. For the assembly, I keep things simple. A thin layer of ragù, Parmesan cheese, bechamel, pasta, and then repeat. Again and again until the dish is nearly full. The final layer is bechamel, topped with a generous amount of Parmesan. At this point, you can bake it immediately, roughly 30 minutes at around 150 degrees Celsius or 300 Fahrenheit, depending on your oven. Or you can do what I usually prefer, and that's to leave it overnight in the fridge. The next day it's usually even better. Like many traditional dishes, it rewards patience. It also freezes remarkably well, making it a perfect meal to prepare ahead of time. For me though, there won't be any freezing today. After a long day in the garden, a plate of homemade lasagna and a glass of wine sound pretty close to perfect to me. And with that, another week here in Piemonte comes to an end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed spending the day with us, and until next time, take care.